So far, we've looked at inheritance of one trait or two traits using Punnett squares, so a monohybrid Punnett square or a dihybrid Punnett square, where we look at the inheritance from parent to offspring and the probability of a trait showing up. But we can also look at the inheritance as it impacts the entire family or a larger group of individuals within a particular family. So we're going to look at the inheritance of a trait as it runs through a family. And to do that, we use a pedigree. So a pedigree is a family tree, but this family tree focuses on a particular trait. And the family tree uses symbols to represent relationships and individuals. So you can see this is an example of a pedigree that looks at a family tree and then inheritance within that family tree. So we're going to start with pretty much a list of the shapes that we can use and the symbols we can use to represent individuals in a pedigree. So you will need to either print out or download this sheet, or you can simply write your own. It's just a bunch of symbols, so it's pretty easy for us to create kind of a key of our symbols. So each of these symbols represents either an individual or a relationship between individuals. So we're simply going to define what each of these represents. In a pedigree, a square is used to represent a male, where a circle is used to represent a female. Pedigrees use shading to represent an individual that has the trait. So this individual is a male that has the trait. This individual is a female that has the trait. A very big key to remember is that a pedigree shades in individuals that has the trait. It does not mean that trait is dominant or recessive necessarily. You really have to know a little bit more about the trait or assess the pedigree to determine if that trait is dominant or recessive. You cannot assume just by looking at the fact that they are shaded. Individuals who are crossed out, notice the slash goes through the entire shape, not just partway through, so it extends past, because if this individual was shaded, you would not be able to tell there was a slash. The slash indicates death. Two individuals that are connected, it represents marriage, or even possibly mating. So if we were looking at maybe a dog pedigree or a pedigree of horses, we would look at mating. The double slashes over the marriage line or the mating line for a human pedigree would represent divorce. Now we have kind of a combo here, where the top portion, notice that would be a couple that has mated or is married, and then there is a drop down, which makes these two individuals parents, and the drop down indicates their children. In this case, the parents here would be generation 1. Notice the 1 is recorded here. It's not always, but this is the first group of individuals in this pedigree at the top, and therefore that would be generation 1. Down below them would be their children. And children are always recorded in order of birth, so they have a son who is older than their daughter. And the son and daughter are generation 2. We could have a much larger pedigree, as you saw on the other paper, where we have either multiple children or those children have their own children, and we could have another level, which would be generation 3 and so on. Now, the two children that you see here are just siblings born from different births, but if we have twins, we can represent them in one of these two fashions. So twins that are fraternal, so they are non-identical. We have pretty much kind of like a partial triangle here that connects them, and then this would lead to the parents. So these are fraternal twins. And identical twins have that same partial triangle, but then it is connected between the two. And identical twins are always the same gender. Fraternal twins might be the same gender, but do not have to. So here are the symbols that we use for most of a pedigree. There are others to indicate other relationships, but this is all that we'll be using. What you're asked to do is now create a pedigree for the family that is described in Canvas. So there is an assignment in Canvas that describes a family, you are to create a pedigree using these symbols to represent the individuals in that pedigree. Keep in mind, shading means has the trait. For this particular assignment, you're simply asked to create the pedigree. There's no trait associated. The assignment does have a quick little intro video to get you started on creating that pedigree. And that pedigree would be uploaded as one of your assignments for this week.